fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Wednesday, April 4th, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. Today is the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination, and what a sad day in history for America that is, and we're going to cover a little bit of that as we move forward. We also got more on the YouTube shooting. Apparently it wasn't a lover's quarrel as was reported yesterday. It was a YouTube quarrel as a demonetized YouTuber took her rage straight to YouTube. We're going to talk about that as well. Also, for our listeners over the Atlantic Ocean in the UK and France and all over Europe, how about this? I'm in Sadiq Khan's London. Self-defense is now equivalent to murder. Homeowner, 78 years old, arrested for murder after burglar armed with a screwdriver he stabbed to death during a break-in. This guy was minding his own business in his house, and two men, one armed with a screwdriver, broke in. The struggle went into the kitchen where he grabbed a knife and stabbed one of the burglars in the chest. The other burglar fled and is still on the run. Police got there, and what did they do? They arrested the homeowner. With all the latest crap that's coming out of the UK and Europe with this, a campaign against knives. What is the UK coming to? How can somebody who is minding his own business in his own house have home intruders come in armed with the intent to, at the very least, commit armed robbery and burglary, and they get stopped by the homeowner? One of them is dead in the process. In America, we call that justice. In London, apparently, they're calling it murder. They're still investigating, but the officers were called shortly before 1 a.m. by the homeowner to report a burglary in progress. The injured man was found collapsed on Further Green Road. He was taken to Central London Hospital where he died. That was one of the burglars. Police said the second burglary suspect fled the scene before they arrived. They're still trying to track him down. This is up on Hagmann Report. A police spokesman said the 78-year-old resident had found two males inside his address. One suspect went upstairs while the homeowner was forced into the kitchen by the second suspect armed with a screwdriver. The struggle had ensued in the kitchen, during which one of the males found inside the property sustained a stab wound to the upper body. And the story goes on for there. The 78-year-old homeowner, who remains in custody, was bruised on his arms, but his injuries are non-life-threatening. Murder squad detectives have taped off several streets close to where the man was arrested. And it goes, it's just crazy. I don't know what else to say. You have a 78-year-old man who's just living his life, and it gets interrupted by burglars. I'm sure he did not, that night say, "Oh, I hope somebody breaks in so I can stab him." How can they justify murder charges here? I don't get it, John. And John, I want to just say this was a great job yesterday with you hosting the Hagmann Report with me. We had Stephen Menking on. We had Stan Deo on. Also, we had Floyd. What's his last name? Why am I drawing a blank?
Brown. Floyd
Brown from westernjournalist.com. And that was a great interview. We're going to have to bring him back because of the sound, though. But it was a good show last night.
Well, thank you. It was a good show. And, I don't know what got into me. I popped out of bed at 3:51 this morning, Joe, and pinned another article. And we'll talk about that here momentarily. But first with your lead regarding this. I mean, this whole situation in England is just tragic. I'm sorry to say, but this is a situation where the British people can't take their government back by force of arms because they don't have any arms. And I guess the only thing to do is leave. And I know that's terrible if you love England as much as anyone loves their home, they're the terra firma upon which they were born. But from the outside looking in, this is clearly a case under Sadiq Khan of the same taqiyya type lying, bamboozling that Muslims do everywhere they go. They are the worst cliquish, clannish immigrants that pour into a country and slowly want to make the country their own, having left their country of birth, which is unlivable.
Yeah.
This from natureofhealing.org. Subtitle, the title of the article is "The Right to Bear Arms." The subtitle, "The Truth Will Not Be Televised." The truth is that the deadliest shootings happen in states with the strictest gun laws. In the UK, where gun restrictions make it difficult to own a gun, I would rewrite that in the UK, where gun restrictions make it impossible to own a gun. But anyway, violence still spreads and the murder rate still rises. Criminals find other weapons, such as knives and acid. In Sweden, migrant gang violence, rape, and acid attacks are rising from illegal weapons smuggled into the country due to a borderless Europe. Criminals are not brought to justice due to outdated laws that do not address flammable weapons. Then there's a graph that shows the murders in London and New York in 2018, and whereas New York sees a significant dip, the rate of murder in London goes straight up. And then it goes on to say in Chicago, a city known for the most restrictive gun laws, it has the highest homicide rates in the world, 650 in 2017, with close to 3,000 people shot in 2017. The media reports the killings as, quote, a grim sign of improvement over the previous. And this is crazy. This is all nuts. Anyway, when you're ready, Joe, I pinned an article about what happened yesterday at YouTube, and then I tied it into what's going on with True News and YouTube, et cetera. We can cover that when you're ready.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. And the last thing I'll say is, I mean, just on this, what's going on in London, what are the citizens supposed to do? If you are at home and somebody breaks into your home, in this country, here in America, especially in many states, some states have, retreat laws where if you retreat or if your life's not in imminent danger, you can defend yourself, but you can't kill somebody. You can't just shoot them in the back. But in other states, like in Texas or Florida, where they have stand your ground laws, you don't have to retreat, and you are able to fight back. But one thing, unless there is some, conspiracy between the homeowner and the burglars, if somebody breaks into your house, you're allowed to do whatever you can to defend them and get them out of your house. What are the people in Europe left to do when they are being charged with murder after defending their own home and lives against people who have broken in with weapons? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I'm sure we're going to continue to follow up on this story as more information comes out. But the people in Europe cannot let this stand, because at what point does a victim's or burglar a victim? At what point does a criminal's rights trump the rights of law-abiding citizens? It does not make sense. Just real quick, we're going to get to the YouTube. The response from China announced that they're going to put tariffs on another 106 U.S. products, including soy, cars, and chemicals. They have not released a date where they said that they're going to do this, but the trade wars continue, which is adding to a volatile stock market. And when Stephen Mencken comes on, we're going to ask him what the possible implications could be and how, if this escalates, where we might see this end up. But, John, let's get into YouTube. I did not read your article yet up on Hagmann Report, but everybody go there. Censorship war goes hot. Shots fired at YouTube. True News is the latest YouTube casualty. Now, Many people, I want to say this. I don't know if you saw this yet, John, but YouTube just deleted the account of the shooter this morning. Not that she would be able to upload any more videos, but I don't know if you even saw this woman. She was a Persian vegan. Very strange. I don't know if you saw the videos with her dancing with animal heads on. It looked very satanic. It looked evil. And I don't know what to make of this, but apparently
it's had issues. No question about that.
She was demonetized, and that's what sent this whole thing in motion. And
you and I were making some ribald jokes on it last night when we were erroneously informed, as was everyone else out of the gate, that this was a lover's tiff run amok. But I wrote this article early this morning. Special thanks, of course, to Steve Quayle, who posted it at stevequayle.com. I actually had Doug Hagmann take a look at it, something I rarely do. He gave me a quick edit job because I wanted to be careful combining these two stories together. This is an article that blends two stories. The shooting yesterday in San Bruno, California, 4 people shot at YouTube's headquarters, 1 dead, the shooter who shot herself. And then the occurrence on Monday, April 2nd, of YouTube deleting True News' account. Now, why did I choose to write about these together? Because what happened to True News is what motivated the shooter, and her name is, her name is Nassim Aghdam. She is a 37-year-old Persian female. Is the same thing. Okay, so she was dealing with the demonetization, copyright infringements, strikes against her content, deleted content, etc., but chose to handle it in a much different way than True News. So I'll just take some pieces from the article quickly and share these with the listeners, and we can move on. Initial reports erroneously stated that the only fatality was the shooter and that the motive was workplace violence stemming from a lover's brawl that ran amok. It was not clear if the shooter took his or her own life or fell to the 5.56 millimeter rounds of law enforcement. We now know that the shooter, 37-year-old Nassim Aghdam, a Persian female, committed suicide after first putting handgun rounds into 3 victims, a 36-year-old man in critical condition and 2 women ages 32 and 37. When examining who the shooter was and searching for what motivated the self-professed animal rights activist and fitness YouTuber to kill individuals who happened to choose eating their lunch on a patio rather than at their desks, we need only read her public remarks aimed at YouTube to understand why she traveled from her home in Riverside, California to San Bruno with murder in her heart. Now, these are her quotes. I'll tie this into True News and hand it back to you, Joe. So these are her quotes. Quote, "I am being discriminated on and filtered on YouTube, and I'm not the only one." End quote. Quote, "There is no free speech in real world, and you will be suppressed for telling the truth that is not supported by the system." End quote. Quote, "There is no equal growth opportunity on YouTube or any other video sharing site." End quote. Regarding the onslaught of deleted accounts, politically motivated strikes, and bogus copyright infringement flags that YouTube brazenly implements on anyone who is not part of the globalist Bush-Clinton herd of sheeple, Miss Aghdam wrote on her Instagram account regarding YouTube's tools: "Censor and suppress people who speak the truth and are not good for the financial or political gains of the system and big business." Now, I inserted into this article a massive disclaimer making it very clear that the Hagmann Report does not support anything that Miss Aghdam did yesterday. But in the subtitle, "Was This Inevitable?" we begin talking about True News. On Monday evening, April 2nd, 2018, Rick Wiles, president of True News, introduced their global television and radio program as follows. Quote, "Question, why did YouTube ban True News? Was it something I said?" End quote. Rick goes on to state, quote, "YouTube has permanently banned True News. Our account was deleted today. All of our content was removed from YouTube. Thousands of videos that were posted on YouTube over years, all gone. YouTube's cyberbullies have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. How did I get 3 strikes against me? The cyber censors went through years of True News episodes. They found 2 True News programs from 2014 that they deemed to be offensive. The third offensive program was produced in early 2017. It was a movie review of The Promise, the truth about the Armenian genocide. Now, listeners, there is an update in the article with link. YouTube has moved much of their content over to a new channel, and that channel is linked in the report. And then I just want to sort of wrap this up by making the following statement. I also pointed out that Jason Goodman's Crowdsource the Truth channel was eliminated. And as a side note, Greg Jackson, the best-selling author of Conservative Comebacks to Liberal Lies, We Won't Get Fooled Again, and his most recent book, 40 Rules to Help Boys Become Men, Greg was suspended from Twitter last night, and he was suspended for tweeting that Neil Patrick Harris, a self-professed gay man who did an awards ceremony in his boxer shorts, is a sodomite. I wrote, bad news, Twitter. Doogie Howser is all grown up now, and he is, by his own public proclamation, a sodomite. So even, unfortunately, Greg Jackson joined the fracas. The bottom line, Joe, is this, is that we will see True News manage their smackdown in a way entirely antithetical to how the shooter in San Bruno did. And I suggested that that every consumer of media and of news out there needs to rely upon the Lord to enable them to, A, see the lie that is being perpetrated upon us, and B, be able to navigate around that lie. And then I wrapped the article up by simply imploring people to realize the time that we are in. Now, Joe, you know I personally believe that we are at the end of the age of the church. Some do not agree with that statement, but that is my personal opinion. We are at a time where Donald Trump cannot save you or your family, but the Lord God Almighty can. And the reality is that we are going to continue to be inundated and deluged with reports of more innocent blood, whether it's on the floors of restaurants or running down the halls of schools or libraries or splattered across the employee patio at YouTube. These things are going to continue to occur. And in my opinion, it is at this point a waste of time to attempt to glean anything truthful from the mainstream media. And I would also really encourage listeners to take a look at this article, because one of the links in it, and let me just scroll back to this, Joe, and thank you for this time. I'll hand it back to you, but this is important. One of the links in the article, it says the following: concurrent to the deletion of years of work from our counterparts at True News and Jason Goodman's channel, Twitter exploded on Monday with a video that clearly demonstrates what we have suspected for years, that all of the news outlets, regardless of political bias and irrespective of local, national, or global coverage, receive scripted talking points and dutifully repeat said scripted remarks verbatim. There is a link in what I just read that is linked to a video on YouTube that shows over 18 different news organizations from all over the country and every size organization, from your local, Iowa City news coverage to the big ABC global national coverage, where, Joe, they are leading their show with the exact same words. In fact, the videographer who cut this video and put it together was able to overlay the narrative, because the narrative is identical from 18 different, it actually builds up to 24 or 30 newsrooms, but it gets confusing after about 18 of them. And when people see the video, they'll understand. The script is coming down from on high, regardless of where you live. The news you're getting in Tempe, Arizona is scripted just like the news that you're getting in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Joe, thanks for letting me speak for so long.
Well, I just want to say something on that. I think we mentioned it yesterday, but some people had a problem with me calling out that St. Clair media group for the way that they disseminated the information on fake news. Now, I said this on the last night's show. It's not that I disagree with their message. I do agree that fake news is a problem. It is coming from the mainstream media. and they are trying to make it appear as though it is coming from the alternative media. And some of it does come from the alternative media, if we're being honest. But there are alternative media organizations that will do any and everything to make sure that they don't put out one article ever of fake news. And this is misrepresented in the press. But my problem is with the tactics of this, because if they can do it with this, they can do it with any other message. And that is to have one person at the top disseminate a message, and the power of that message to be reached by 150, 200, 500 local newsrooms across the USA. I mean, if you're going to do that, at least change it up by, a local station. Allow them some leeway to change the message. When you have one unified message that's being read like a script, that's propaganda, plain and simple. And it's been going on for far too long. It's never going to stop. It's only going to get worse. But I just have a problem with, no matter what the message is, this coordinated attack, unless it's an emergency alert or some kind of breaking news that people need to be aware of. Don't do that. It's a turnoff, I guess, if you'd say that. It just shows how controlled information can be, and it really takes away from the message. But all in all, the St. Clair Media Group has taken a beating in the mainstream media, and there's a piece up on Hagmann Report. Panic in the newsroom. CNN, MSNBC spend 211 minutes trashing the Sinclair Group, and this is from Newsbusters. And it goes on to say that the Sinclair Broadcasting Group ran an ad, a must-run promo that warned against biased and fake news. The two have slammed it as Trump-backed state-run TV on par with China, Russia Today, and the former Soviet Union, that the two channels have deemed chilling, frightening, and a really embarrassing moment for journalism. Now, with that said, it's just insanity that these people are the same people who have done nothing but coordinate this lie and deception about, how bad Donald Trump is and he's a criminal and a Russian collusion, blah, 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 blah. When a message is put out about that fake news, warning of the dangers of that fake news, and I'm not talking about like CNN's warnings to themselves, I'm talking about an actual warning on local news stations to tell people to watch out for this. And the best part about this message was they asked for feedback. If you think we're doing something or misrepresenting something, you notify us, and we'll make sure we put the facts out. But the mainstream media didn't like this because it's contrary to their narrative, and it exposes this is what they do also. Only they're not doing it to make sure that people get the facts and the truth. They're doing it for the opposite reasons, to brainwash people and trick them and to tell them lies and to share that deception. So that's the problem, and that's the difference. But I will go and read your article, John, and it's unfortunate that True News had their YouTube channel terminated, but hopefully they can appeal that decision or at least start a new YouTube channel. And this is the importance of why people need to help fund and support the alternative media, because when things like this happen, and then Rick Wiles just built a new studio for the video presentation. So it's unfortunate, but they will survive, and we need to make sure that we stay in their corner. I want to switch gears here. We got to bring Steven on in just a few minutes. Remember that whole big, maybe a year and a half ago, the Target standing up saying, yes, we'll allow transgender men into women's bathrooms. Man exposes himself to child in Target's woman bathroom, pushed into the child's stall and exposed himself. Openly progressive Target prides itself on allowing biological men to enter the women's restroom if that's how they self-identify. The policy enacted in 2016 outraged conservatives for fear it would put women and girls at risk. According to NBC Chicago, police are now on the hunt for a man who exposed himself to a child in the women's restroom at a Target store in the South Loop. And you can go to the Daily Wire to read the rest of the story, but is it any surprise that stuff like this happens when you allow? Would this stuff happen even if there wasn't the bathroom policy? Possibly. But are you making it more possible for it to happen? Absolutely. And this is just, we don't have to spend time on this, but it's just another example of the hypocritical, insane evil that the left promotes and the social decadence that they want to see take place. And it's really unfortunate. But this leads to another article from the Daily Wire. And I want to touch on this, then we'll bring Stephen on. Dear Christians, there is one thing worse than being an atheist. And I think this fits in nicely, John, with what we've been talking about all week. As Christians, we tend to think that atheists are the most dangerous spiritual state. Indeed, they are in a dangerous state, but not the most dangerous. The atheist is surely closer to redemption than the Christian, who hangs on the name but empties it of its substance. There is nothing worse than being a casual Christian who lives and acts and thinks, and in every way believes just as the atheists do. It is better to be an unbeliever and to know you're an unbeliever than to be an unbeliever and think you're a Christian. Whatever the decline of Christianity in America is discussed, the focus is always on the dwindling number of professed believers. But that's not really the problem, nor is it the truest evidence of Christianity's decline. If the church had lost 5 or 10% over the years, and the remaining 75% were truly on fire with faith, if they were authentically and substantially Christian, our culture would still be in fine shape. But it is not in fine shape. By their fruits you shall know them, and by their fruits of our Christian country seem strongly to suggest that we are not a Christian country at all. And if we are not a Christian country despite our majority Christian population, then we must consider what America's Christians, many of them, are really so much different from their atheists. And this is on the Daily Wire. And the story goes on from there. It's a really good write-up. And I agree, it is better probably to be an atheist than to be a Christian, a professed Christian, but stopping your belief with those words. Would you agree with that, John?
I would. In fact, I think that different people have a different attitude as to what degree of relationship one may have with Jesus Christ. I mean, there are some people out there, Joe, who pray about whether they should eat, rice checks or wheat checks for breakfast. There are others who pray once a day. There are some who pray when they drive. There are others who pray in the shower. There are some people who pray when they wake up and when they go to sleep, but not throughout the day. I mean, there's as many different types of believers as there are types of people. And so having grown up in the church myself, I'm always what I would call probably hyper defensive to other Christians telling me or giving me their opinion on my Christianity. But I also know that I can be a very mediocre Christian. On the other hand, I would rather be a mediocre Christian who's saved by the blood and trying than somebody who's out pounding the drum and banging on the counter and saying there is no such thing as God. But I think if you make the proper distinction, and that article sounds as though it does, then yeah. Although that article is getting into semantics because if someone professes the name of Christ, has called on Christ as the Christ, they do believe that Jesus is Christ, and when asked, they have the guts to say, I am a Christian. I would rather be in that position if I got hit by a bus randomly out of the middle of nowhere than somebody who's an atheist. But yes, provided that if you add it to the thesis, it's better to be an atheist than a kind of pretend Christian or a lukewarm Christian or whatever. Provided you're going to make it through that day, then I see where the argument lies. If I'm going to unexpectedly meet my maker that day, I would rather meet the Lord and have him say, man, you dropped the ball 10,000 times. But when people asked you who I was, you proclaimed that I was the Christ. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting into semantics. Maybe I'm parsing through details. But that's my take on it, Joe.
Okay, well, everybody, if you get a chance, go to the Daily Wire and read that article, as it is a great reminder as to what it is that as Christians we are supposed to do and how we're supposed to act and how we're supposed to live, and not in the not thinking like an atheist or thinking like a secular person and calling ourselves Christian. If we're going to call ourselves a Christian, we must act on that as well, because those actions are just as important as our beliefs, and that's so important to remember. While we're bringing Stephen on, just want to do this real quick. The MyPillow, Mike Lindell, owner of MyPillow, is standing by Laura Ingraham in a big way. And this is from the Washington Times. Mike Liddell of MyPillow, inventing and founding company fame, put forth a bold message on his Twitter feed that in just a few short words smacked to shame land the would-be fascist and wannabe censors of the world who've been demanding Laura Ingraham be fired from Fox News. He says, listen up, all you cowardly and wishy-washy boycott businesses. This is how it's done. I did not take my advertising down from Laura Ingraham and Fox News, nor do I intend to. And that's all he said, which is a very different message than so many of these weak-kneed advertisers who quaked in their shoes and pulled their spots from Fox News just because they were contacted by a bunch of minor-age kids with a petty point of view like David Hogg. And the article goes on from there, and I posted this on Hagmann Report. But this guy, the owner of MyPillow, is a very strong Christian advocate, and it is a good reminder to see that people are going to not buckle under the pressure of these social justice lunatics who want to do any and everything to silence the opposing political viewpoint, which falls under silencing and destroying really the Constitution is what they're advocating. And then to see actual companies jump on that bandwagon and demand the censorship and demand, people's jobs, it's just getting ridiculous. So it's great to see a company who's not afraid to put their foot down and say, you guys are crazy. I'm going to continue to put my money in what I believe. And that's always great to see. We have with us Stephen Menking, and he was on last night on Hagmann Report with us for an hour, and it was a fantastic interview. Stephen, it's great to have you back on. If we can, I'd like to start with the latest announcements on the tariffs, as China announced new tariffs on 106 U.S. products. Is this just the beginning of a trade war? How can this play out to what everybody's worried about some that this could go spin out of control to the point where it's affecting currencies and economies and everything in between?
Well, thanks again for having me on with you guys. It's a blessing to be able to share this platform with you here every week, and I certainly appreciate it. In regard to the tariffs and the wider spread implications as to how these are going to play into all these other markets that we're talking about, to be honest with you, Joe, if we're concerned about the disruption of currency and the problems with trade and economics, the impact of some additional tariffs is going to be difficult to disintermediate from all of the other problems that we're dealing with. I mean, for me, when we get down to the root of everything economically, it has to do with debt and it has to do with interest rates. But let's talk a bit about the tariff dynamics more specifically. So these are targeted, and you'd imagine that there would be a tit for tat kind of approach, and many people are lauding this as a positive development. Others are saying that it's going to lead to more harm than good. And it is fair in any one of these situations, you will have certain parties who benefit and other parties who are harmed. And the question is, what is the net result going to be? And it's difficult to figure out, because these tariffs are policies that can be reversed or extended or expanded. It doesn't require a significant amount of legislative maneuvering in order to do this. This is simply the implementation of economic policy here. So what we see is, because it's an executive order kind of level negotiation, what the ultimate result is anyone's guess. I mean, President Trump did tweet earlier this morning that, in terms of the quote unquote trade war, we've already lost it. And that identifies the importance of a physical, actual productive economy. Our primary products are based on credit and the maneuvering of things around. It's basically entertainment and debt are what we specialize in here. And that doesn't mean that there aren't any manufacturing based industries, but one of the things that I've mentioned previously in other appearances, primarily on the flagship Hagmann Report broadcast, as well as on our own podcast on the Objective and the Amateur Society, is that if we are going to be able to manage a transition from one monetary system to another, we're not going to be able to do that without an effort to build up an industrial / manufacturing base again first. And so to the extent that the tariffs could potentially promote that, then maybe that's a good idea, but it really is difficult to say. And so anyone who is attempting to say that it's an all-in good or bad deal is being rather naive in terms of their own assessing their own ability to figure out what the ultimate consequences are going to be. Yes, we have seen the pattern historically where when trade goes south, then that escalates to political relations going further in the opposite direction, and in the final analysis that can and has in many instances in the past led to war. Now, will that happen again this time? I honestly, well, it certainly isn't in either the United States or China's best interest to do something like that. However, these ideas about protectionist economics around the margin, they are interplaying with the dynamic of the East versus the West and the whole reserve currency spat. And we have to zoom out here to try and get a handle on the overall significance of these kind of moves with respect to broader geopolitical and economic trends. So that's a long-winded way of saying, Joe, that I honestly couldn't tell you. But any more precise pronouncements on my behalf would simply be educated speculation and a little bit too far into the land of speculation for my taste.
Okay, and we'll continue to look into this, and I think it's being more overblown as they're trying to continue to show this chaos from the Trump administration. I don't think it's as big as a deal as they're making it out to be, and I think things hopefully will settle down. But again, that's just my initial response. Stephen, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch. Okay, so we had this YouTube shooter yesterday, and we saw at first they were reporting that it was an active shooter situation. Then they were reporting that it was some kind of lovers' quarrel. Actually, CNN was taken to task for its sexist comments once it found out it was a woman shooter about, a lover triangle that went wrong. But I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of this shooter's YouTube videos. It is the weirdest thing. There's something way off with this person. I don't know what to make of all this. Apparently she was mad because her videos were demonetized, but from what I can tell, who is watching this crap? I mean, she's dancing around with animal heads on. She's supposedly a vegan, anti-government, anti-Illuminati, anti-gay, Iranian. I don't even know what you call this or what. She seems disturbed in her videos, and I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of them, but I can't imagine she was making any kind of money off what she was putting out. And they're saying that this is she was angry. Law enforcement even talked to her earlier in the day before she carried out the attack because her family was concerned. But this whole situation is just so weird. I don't know what to make of it. What do you think's going on with this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's times like these that make you wonder if the Mandela effect is really real and if we're living in the Matrix or not, because like, what kind of scenario is this? I haven't watched any of those videos, but of course, casually scrolling through my Twitter timeline yesterday, it was populated with all sorts of these things as they came out. And I think one of the lessons to take away from this entire debacle is that, people jump onto any little thing in order to broadcast their 2 cents. And oftentimes it's emotional, oftentimes it's reactive, and oftentimes it's inflammatory. And sometimes when that happens, your foot ends up squarely in your mouth. And, we're talking about a situation where what is the level of reportage coming to in terms of the media, where you could go in so many different directions. I mean, it's one thing for people to speculate about stuff in connection with previous narratives, but it's another for media organizations to report things in a way that is deceptive and to like edit people's facial features in order to change the description and the perception. But we have to understand the mechanic here, that is primarily based on the idea that first impressions are extraordinarily significant from a cognitive perspective. And so if your first impression is, the shooter was white, that gets anchored. And this is the same kind of phenomenon where you see a piece of news or something that's reported get a ton of publicity, a ton of spread on social media, and then the retraction comes in response, and the spread of the retraction is a minute fraction of the original story. So again, it's a kind of situation where I have no idea what's going on specifically here, but there are many different just weird, strange things. It's almost like, John, the article that you posted, we're in a territory where people are just insane in a very real way. We've lost the handle, we've lost the narrative, we've lost the plot, and so people are latching on to all sorts of different ideologies and then taking them to their extreme end, and that doesn't bode well for a civilized society working together to cooperate and find solutions to problems, even through political or ideological disagreements. I mean, this is a picture of, frankly, I don't mean to be disparaging, because there are plenty of fine people out in California, but some people are wackos and a bunch of them live out there. So that's the way it goes. John, I hope I didn't offend you personally as a resident of the state.
Probably did.
Sorry for.
You probably did. John's very defensive of California. And yeah, I heard an interesting statistic, and I don't know if this is true or not, but 50% of all serial killers in America spend time in California. I don't know what relevance that has to anything, but it's kind of weird. But yeah, California does have a lot of great people. We've gotten emails over the years of people letting us know, yes, there are still conservatives here. Yes, we have a huge problem with the liberals in our state, but there are still a lot of conservatives there. But they don't have a voice at all in California. So
yeah, certainly not in the institutions or in the politics or in the Silicon Valley centers that are projecting power. But God bless them to keep on paying their taxes and dealing with it. But I don't know too much. I haven't done a lot of digging into the background or into the family of what's going on here. I imagine that I'm going to have to leave that to others to do, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. California, in the 1960s and 70s, California was a blue dog Democrat state for the most part, although we had a host of Republican governors. And if you can believe this, up to the late 1980s, early 1990s, San Francisco had a Republican mayor. But what happened was, as trade agreements like NAFTA came into full fruition, when we heard Ross Perot famously quip that the sucking sound that we heard would be jobs leaving North America, the sort of, I guess sometimes they're called Truman Democrats, the labor Democrats, the people who are union guys and union women. We had a big General Motors plant in my hometown growing up in Fremont, California. When those jobs left, then the California political ideology, if you will, shifted from what used to be the reasonable Democratic Party of the 1960s, 70s, which was, hey, we're going to fight for the little guy. We're about unions, we're about teachers, the classic DNC stuff. Well, California, of course, denigrated into the DNC of the Hillary Clintons and Bill Clintons, which still pronounce all that stuff and amplify that stuff, but it's nothing more than platform party rhetoric, because in reality, the DNC, and I would say California, has led the charge with this, no longer sticks up for the little guy, doesn't even care about the little guy. You're a 9-digit tax base, and that is why so many elitists, be they Silicon Valley elitists or Hollywood elitists, glom onto the Democratic Party, because it's truly the party of the elite. The basic notion is, we know what's best for you. And this is when it gets really sickening. And we love you so much, We're going to save you from yourself because you don't know, and we do. And that's the part of California that ultimately pushed me out 2.5 years ago. Personally, I'll never live in the state again. The weather's amazing, but I will be darned if I'm going to live in a state where you have to fill out paperwork to buy bullets.
Yeah, I hear you, John, and I'm here in New York City, and so, it's opposite sides of the country, and that same kind of attitude has predominated in terms of these coastal regions, but that's not entirely a new phenomenon. But your point about the historical trends and the way in which these ebbs and flows have turned into more ebbs than flows recently is a good point. And when we think about the economic concentration of wealth and power and even just population, we're looking at a scenario where various states are, in essence, defying the federal government in a bunch of different ways. And so California is one of those as it pertains to the sanctuary cities law, where you end up in really bizarro world scenarios that are reminiscent of the times leading up to the Civil War in terms of states refusing to enforce federal law. Now, there's something to be said for states' rights, but there has to be a dividing line when the well-being and protection of the nation is at stake, and immigration is now one of those critical issues where it's existential, not just from a demographic perspective, but from an economic perspective as well. And so we see the caravan of people coming up to the southern border. We see President Trump's promise to deploy the military essentially until the wall is built. It's like, are we in a pre-war war zone ourselves already? I mean, this is North America. It feels like the Middle East at the moment. Well,
Stephen, let me ask you this, because this is an interesting topic. Okay, I've seen both sides of the argument. Many people are saying, well, the president can't do this. This is tyrannical and authoritarian. And at the same time, you have other people cheering this on. And we have seen the southern border and Border Patrol have been overwhelmed. But what really bugs me about this caravan of people is that they are listing demands that they believe should be accepted, upon their crossing over. They basically demand to be, become U.S. citizens as soon as they cross the border. No care of the law, no care of anything else other than what they want. And we see that the liberal media is getting behind them. Now, I understand that you have two things at play here. One, you have our Christian belief system, which is very clear on how to treat people, yet it also is very clear about following laws. And then you have the battle for immigration here, which we have the two opposing sides. One where you want people to go through the proper channels to become citizens, and the other, you want open borders and blanket amnesty. My problem with this is both the hubris of the media of the left, basically by saying that not accepting these people or rejecting them at the border, that this is some kind of authoritarian move. And then the response of Trump going to send the military. I believe there are many other options in between before sending actual U.S. forces to the southern border. But either way, this is an impossible situation in the atmosphere and climate that we have with the media and the division in our political beliefs.
Yeah, and it's a tricky kind of thing to parse because emotions run hot in all different venues for a variety of different reasons. But it stands as an important point that the job of the federal government is to protect and to invoke policies for the benefit of the citizens of the United States. We are not responsible for everyone in the world, even though we have certainly taken on that role in an imperial sense, which is inappropriate. But the thing is, people have to understand that there are trade-offs. Whenever you make a decision or whenever you take an action, let's say to benefit certain people, that isn't just a free thing. Now, you can disguise the consequences of it, but it harms other people. Now, whether we're talking about jobs or tax dollars or anything else, if you are transferring benefits to someone, you're taking them away from someone else, because we're not talking about the area of economics that is not a zero-sum game as it pertains to economic growth. And so people will go through all sorts of convoluted statements, but more often than not, we're at opposite ends of the spectrum. On one side, we see people making simplistic appeals to emotion that don't stick and can't stand as a basis for proper, consistent policy. And on the other hand, we have people who are overly educated to the point where they have no contact with the real world, trying to come up with models and situations and theories that will construct a scenario where, oh, this is actually a good thing. Because if you want to set out to prove a premise, then you're going to make whatever argument that you can and assume that people are so naive that just because there is an argument in favor of something means that that is the way that you should go. So we have ideology determining the process of reasoning rather than the facts on the ground and a general understanding of history and of trends and of mechanisms and of economics driving it. And that's not the fault of the people, because economics itself is flawed as a discipline in those regards. So what I see are the analyses that are overly simplistic and emotional that shouldn't be driving policy. And I also see the analyses that are overly complicated and not in touch with the real world that are driving policy. And it seems like those two are dialoguing and leaving the middle of, can't we just do some practical common sense things? Like, wouldn't it be better to try that? Like, instead of in an emotional reaction, doing away with the Second Amendment entirely, or on the other hand, trying to concoct some complicated scheme that requires additional layers of federal regulations and everything else, how about we properly enforce the laws that exist on the books? And the same thing could apply to immigration. The same thing could apply in so many different places. And we always have tons of different solutions that are looking for problems, and the ultimate game here is one of control. And that's particularly true for people of a Marxist persuasion who will disguise themselves under various different labels and project themselves as the martyrs, or themselves acting on behalf of other people who they essentially use as human shields in order to advance the emotional persuasion capacity of a policy argument. And it's just ridiculous. But this has been going on for the past couple decades at least, escalating, of course, in the past few years under the previous administration. But this is where we're at. We're seeing this like barbell of policy, where on one hand it's emotionally weighted and instant reaction, and on the other hand it's wonkery and academic theory and everything else like that doesn't have a connection with the real world. I say we go with common sense approach. I say we go with what has worked in the past, and I say we just handle our business appropriately rather than trying to add some additional schemes on top of it, or just make every decision based on the wit and whim of people who are being driven by emotions, as valid as those emotions may be.
Yeah, and we see, and that's very well said, how the manipulation of emotions is so, it's at its peak today, more so than ever before. And do we know why that is, Stephen? Is it the lack of spiritual discipline, the lack of discipline overall? I mean, how are people so easily led around by their emotions like we've never seen before?
Well, I think there's several different perspectives here. One is the overarching worldview perspective that, this life is all there is, and so our time frame for what we should do is restricted to a limited number of unknown days, weeks, months, and years. It's a limited timetable, and so what the Bible says is, if Christ isn't risen, then we're to be pitied among all men, because we should just be eating and drinking, for tomorrow we die. And so the immediate gratification that that has come as a result of embracing scientific naturalism and these modernist and postmodernist kind of ideas, and jettisoning knowledge of God and the supernatural and the eternal out the window. It forces our time frame for decision making into the short term in an immediate kind of sense. There's also the affluence that America has achieved that has led to that shortening of time frame, because we all assume that there's long-term security for us, and so we just want to optimize in the present. And then on top of that, the emotions and the gratification and everything else like that is exacerbated by the presence of visual media and on-demand immediate visual media, because a picture says 1,000 words, and so your emotions can be stimulated in a variety of different ways much more effectively through digital media and through visuals than they could have been in the past. And so it's this connectivity, the worldview, the technology, all of it combined leads to a scenario where, and in addition, just the general understanding of how human beings and their emotional reactions work. But there's a wide variety of factors, and any one of those is worth a significant study in its own right. But cooler heads have to prevail here, and it should give us an important kind of understanding that whatever storm is appearing on the horizon or is here in the moment, if you are stable and steady and relying on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you are steadfast in your faith, then wait a week, wait a month. Does anyone care about Las Vegas anymore? Does anyone care about the stuff that happened a few months ago? Like, there's going to be some new thing for people to have emotional outrage about, and they're either going to burn themselves out by depleting their body of the biochemical resources that it needs. But you can only be pulled in so many different directions in violent emotional terms for so long before you lose your stability. And so that's the key point. We can't hold the center together in our own strength. We have to rely on the Lord for all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's a great article up at the Miami Herald. When it comes to news, America is in a state of pure polarization. A physicist has said, and he's went on to do a number of studies examining collective behavior in a number of fields, and they say that America is consuming more news more than ever, and it's driving them further and further apart. But this is just part of it, the 24-hour news cycle, the attention spans of Americans, and what is important to them is all part of what we're talking about here. And the spiritual warfare aspect, we cannot deny that this is first and foremost what we're dealing with, and it manifests in a number of ways. And if you are not in that relationship with the Lord, you are very likely to fall victim to the deceptions, to the manipulations of both your thoughts and your emotions, and the truth that is out there that seemingly is being censored more and more as we move forward. Stephen, we are at the end of the show. We only have about a minute and a half, 2 minutes left. Do you have any interesting shows coming up? Anything you want to promote before we part ways here?
Well, nothing to promote, I suppose, other than to say that I will be at the conference in Canton with both of you and Coach Dave and Pastor Mike and everyone else. So if you're coming to that event, be sure to say hello. I'll be the tall guy that you can recognize from the video on the Hagmann Report. So that'll be great. Look forward to speaking with people and to having a good time of fellowship, to seeing John again in person after a couple of years, to meeting Pastor Mike Spalding for the first time. So it's a nice On the Objective kind of reunion there. So check out our website, ontheobjective.org. YouTube and Twitter are just On the Objective. We're putting out some great content on a regular basis, including cross-pollinating with everything that we're doing with you guys. So thanks again for having me on. Really appreciate the opportunity. God bless you guys. I just pray that he would protect you, bless you, keep you, and give you the faith and the strength that you need to continue standing and remaining obedient to his calling on your lives in this hour.
Amen. And God bless you too as well, Stephen. You have a great day. Thanks for your time again today. And Stephen joins us each Wednesday on the second half of the Hagmann Daily Show. And we can't wait to get to Canton either. It's going to be a great conference. I did a lot of research over the weekend getting my presentation together. Still got a lot more to go, but it's always great when you get that first chunk of things done, because the conference, in the blink of an eye, it will be here. It'll be here before you know it, and got to be ready for that. But absolutely looking forward to it. And what, if you're unfamiliar, what Steven's talking about is the Occupy 2018 conference. Go to CoachDaveLive.com. There you can register and purchase your tickets. I know there's not a lot left. It's in Canton, Ohio, April 20th, 21st, and 22nd, and there is a host of great speakers who are going to be there, and that includes my father, myself, and John, and Stephen Menking is going to be there with his family as well, and we're really looking forward to that, as we do get to go to a few of these conferences a year, and they are always so much fun getting to meet everybody who is there, getting to listen to some of your favorite guests and speakers live and in real time. And we always have great experiences when we do these events. So, again, really looking forward to them. John, it was a great show. We are out of time. SimplyCleanFoods.net. We're going to hear from the owner again tomorrow for maybe the last 10 minutes of the show. He's going to come on and talk about the latest deals and products that he has, including his coffee that he sent us that I still have not drank because I don't have a coffee grinder. I got to grind these beans up somehow. But that'll do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.